Microsoft's purpose is in service of your purpose.
And again, 2024 is the year that partners come out as the leading edge of the spear on finding this buyer intent.
You show up to every meeting and demonstrate why you are relevant.
Every day I have to force myself to make sure that I'm taking one step ahead in terms of my own learning.
That flywheel of success is where you will build momentum, and that momentum will continue, and then you feed into the other systems to say, this is what we did, this is how we did it together.
Welcome back to Ultimate Guide to Partnering. I'm Vince Menzione, and my mission is to help leaders like you achieve your greatest results through successful partnering. And today I'm excited to welcome back AWS back in the house for a compelling conversation with Josh Greene, the Senior Manager of Marketplace Development at AWS. Such a great conversation with Josh about the success he's had in role the last 4.5 years, driving this marketplace strategy at AWS, the work he's done with some of the biggest ISV marketplace organizations like CrowdStrike and Snowflake, and his best practices that he'll share for successful marketplace development and deployment. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed welcoming Josh Greene. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I am so excited to have you and AWS back in the house. It's been quite some time since we've had an AWS episode. And you and I got to meet actually last year at the Catalyst event back in August. Seems like 100 years ago, right? Was it like 6 months or so? Not even. You're the Senior Manager of Marketplace Development at AWS. And I'm so excited to welcome you today to Ultimate Guide to Partnering.
Well, ever since we first met and I started seeing what you've been doing, I've been excited to speak more with you and share some of the insights, but I'm really happy to be here today.
So, excited to have AWS back in the house. Second, one of my favorite topics right now is about marketplace. So I've been referring to this as the marketplace moment. So, but for our listeners and viewers that may not know you and your role and mission at AWS, can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I've been in sales and business development and channels for 25 years. Here at AWS, I've been on staff for 4.5 years, and I started as an IC actually, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but I've built a team, and the team focuses on partners and how to help them be successful by leveraging the AWS Marketplace. And, you know, in my travels over the 25 years and certainly the 4.5 years here, I know the same thing is true. Every partner wants to figure out how to grow and how to be more efficient. So that's been our mantra since day one.
And so tell us a little bit more about that role on the marketplace development side.
Sure. Well, we have a diverse set of partners in our community. I specifically work with ISV partners. And for example, when I started, I worked with 10 of the most leaned in AWS marketplace sellers, which are ISVs. Think Snowflake, Splunk, CrowdStrike, et cetera. And the goal was to learn from them and develop a set of best practices about what's working and how to help them accelerate growth, but also see value back. Now, starting point for that was always working with the partnership leader or the alliance leader that had the AWS Alliance. And then since that time, I now have a team, and we've spawned different teams in different regions that have the same charter, how to help them adopt best practices to unlock value. And it's a really fun job because we get to hire from a bunch of different backgrounds, and no day is ever the same. We work with operations, finance, sales, marketing, product, et cetera. So it's a really diverse, role in team. But we're having a lot of fun, and there's a lot of work to be done.
So do you see the job as maybe coming in as like a SWAT team and helping the organization better align and maybe operationalize their marketplace strategy?
Yeah. So, if you listen to a keynote from Ruba Borno, let's say at reInvent in 2023, you'll hear, automation and scale. Of course, you'll hear generative AI and a number of other topics. But in order for us to be successful, we need to create automation that helps streamline, and reduce inefficient processes and replace them with efficient ones. So in terms of a SWAT team, I was a SWAT team of one when I started, and now we have a group of people that are doing that activity, and it's never to be something that is there for good. It's always, how do we innovate ourselves out of this job to create automation so that we can go tackle another opportunity.
You mentioned some ISVs, and we're going to double click on those ISVs in a moment here, but it seems like your team's been pretty darn successful there.
Well, we're one team among many. It takes a village. So there are teams, there are developers and engineers, there are partner development managers, there are customer advisors. We have a lot of different roles. My team just happens to sit directly partner facing and tends to be on the cutting edge with those partners that are leaning in the most. And that's where we learn the most, from the partners that are the most taxing. And I guess taxing equals opportunity. And so we're part of a really robust community here.
So I've been calling it the marketplace moment, right? Because several things have happened. I've been discussing the tectonic shifts we've been seeing, right? It's been going on since even before COVID, the transformation, the change in buying patterns and behaviors, the millennials becoming the decision makers, the decisions being made in the lines of business, and buying happening now with clicks, right? Where people don't even want to talk with a salesperson. I tap my phone 3 times and a box shows up in several hours. So our world has changed from that perspective. And now I think, I've been talking about co-selling for many years. And a lot of times organizations would say, why do I need to do co-selling? Like, I'm not getting any value from my hyperscaler partner. Like, why should I go do that? But I want to latch on to this durable cloud budget conversation. It seems that the realization, if you will, right, that AWS has a tremendous or a captive relationship at the executive suite within these organizations, enterprises, public sector agencies, and the like, that there's this huge durable budget available. And, recent estimates are that there are over $340 billion in durable cloud budgets amongst the 3 hyperscalers. And then layer on top of that, kind of the ease of partnering with other organizations. We're seeing so much of a pattern now, and we'll talk a little bit more about the success that your organization has had. But this realization that marketplace is really a pathway to greater success, working with a hyperscaler like AWS, but also partnering amongst other organizations, building multi-party offers and approaches to the customer to surround the customer. I'd love your perspective on this what I'm calling marketplace moment.
Yeah, I feel really, really fortunate. So I had been looking for an opportunity and had tried to do this with a prior employer. The old term was cloud services broker, but that was really the first coming, in my opinion, of what became this cloud marketplace. And we tried and failed. And the reason why I was attracted to AWS was, having tried and failed before at a startup, at another company, is I thought, if anyone is going to figure this out, in my opinion, it's AWS, because of what you just, some of the elements, that desire to disrupt, to be infinitely customer obsessed, but also with this tailwind of customers that are putting their trust in AWS and making these commitments. So I don't know if I would use the word, captive audience. I would say an audience that's been earned with our customers, but that's been a tremendous tailwind. And turning that into, like, what does that mean for marketplace? It's been huge. It's been an opportunity where one of the first fundamental pillars, of our value proposition was that, and how to leverage cloud commitments to help our partners be successful. But, our value proposition has really, expanded past that. And one little story about this is, I was really challenged with how to convey this message to the executive team at one of our ISVs, or to the board, to convince them about why to take this leap. This is going back now 4 years. And one of our business partners said, hey, I explained it to them this way, and you should try it too. The cloud committed spend budget is a tremendous amount, has tremendous gravity, and it's pulling dollars into it. And either as an organization, we can fight this gravity, or we can benefit from this gravity. And what I thought was particularly interesting about that example was, and some of the best examples of where I've seen us go from nothing to something very material, is that's independent of whether we might have an AWS service that could be competitive with that offering. So some of our most successful partners that we work with may have a product or a service that's actually competitive to one of our own. Take MongoDB or Snowflake. They're phenomenally successful with Marketplace, and have made that decision that the opportunity to tap into that cloud committed spend and marketplace as a mechanism to reach customers and co-selling as part of that, as you mentioned it, is too powerful. And we've gotten a lot better with it over time. So those are the way I think about it is this has been a huge advantage for us. And we've gotten a lot better at partnering.
I love the term gravity in this conversation as well. I do think it depicts it properly as you think about it, right? Because I do think there's a tremendous amount of gravity. And, you and I were at an event that was very partner centric, but really organizations need to back up and take a look at the bigger picture, right? And the gravity amongst the three hyperscalers, AWS being the most prominent and the largest across those hyperscalers in terms of IaaS. It means that you're having the conversations at the C-suite level, not necessarily in the line of business, but you're negotiating at that CFO level of the organization. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a CFO, it's a company level decision that's happening depending upon where an organization wants to invest in the cloud. And I think it's not just one thing. So we talked about, cloud commitment. A lot of these pieces have to come together. So the marketplace had to mature in terms of feature sets. The partner programs you were mentioning August and the Partnership Leadership Summit. I remember I ran into someone that we both know, Dorothy Copeland, who I reached out to, I want to say 14 years ago when I was with SoftChoice, where I was for 13 years, and tried to engage with Dorothy, who was just building a partner program at AWS at that time. And I remember, and we had a laugh about this, being a little miffed that AWS didn't have time for me. And when I ran into Dorothy just last August, she said, well, we actually didn't have a program at that time. So it wasn't like I didn't want to work with you. I just didn't have a mechanism to do it. That was in 2011. And look at us now. So it's really just in the last, 13 years, it's come an incredible distance. And that's another thing that we benefited from.
How about this ease of partnering, right? I think about surrounding the customer, and we were talking about Jay McBain a little bit earlier. Jay McBain comes up in just about every conversation these days. But he likes to talk about the seats at the table. And I like to think about it from the customer-centric perspective. The customer isn't just buying a cloud. It's not just buying a security solution. It's maybe solving a business need, a requirement. And that requires maybe several different organizations coming together to solve for that. And what I see happening with Marketplace, we used to talk about, when I was at Microsoft back in my day there, we used to talk about this thing called partnering to partnering, and where we get two organizations together and try and go sell something or solve a solution need for a customer. It seems to me that Marketplace automates that process in many respects. Would you agree?
Well, I think it can automate it. It can, let's say, it's kind of lubricate that process in terms of how it, like, for a variety of reasons. You mentioned that there might be a cloud spend commit, in place. Well, that means that there may actually be in place identified economic buyer that a third party who's trying to sell a solution, doesn't have visibility or access into yet. I'd say the development and the growth of our channel business via the CPPO program that we have to embrace a channel partner. There's a lot of work that's being done with the GSIs, on that as well. So I think Jay said something like there's 8 seats around the table in any specific deal. I don't know what the exact number was, but I think we can be a kind of a strain that runs through all of them, and every situation is different. Every customer scenario is different in terms of who has influence and who's driving that opportunity, but Marketplace is a bit of a commerce engine underpinning that is a concept that we're aware of and trying to extend.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And the lubricant of that, helping bring or stitch. I like to use the term stitching it all together.
Stitching better. I like stitching better.
So after your last earnings report, and congratulations on a successful quarter, another successful quarter, it was estimated that AWS had roughly $155 billion in durable cloud budgets. And that the attribution of that, having that larger share is what I would say. But also AWS, maybe coming from the retail side of things, was early in terms of a marketplace strategy. It seems like the other two were maybe further behind on that. What would you say about that?
First of all, there are others that are far more qualified than I am to talk about, earnings and the growth of the cloud committed budget. But what I can tell you is, in my observation, coming in first as an outsider 4.5 years ago, was it takes some acclimatizing to AWS culture. And AWS culture is rooted in Amazon culture. And so that notion of, we have leadership principles, and you hear people talk about them, but they are very much alive and well. And the first one that rules them all is customer obsession. So if you are someone who is customer obsessed and you're understanding what a customer's problems are and you're seeking to solve them, the byproduct of that is you earn trust, another leadership principle, and they reward you with a commitment, and that becomes a durable cloud commitment, but that's based on trust. So I think the Amazon culture certainly influenced this dramatically, as well as what worked in the Amazon Marketplace and what's working over here. How much third party versus how much first party services are being sold, and how big is the opportunity for the market opportunity for each of those things as it pertains to third party software or data or pro services, et cetera. So I think, the fact that AWS was imbued with a lot of people that had Amazon culture and brought that over, it's still very much alive and well, and something we talk about all the time.
If you're part of the movement, you know I have a very strong point of view. I've sat on both sides of the table for over 30 years now. I've built growth through partnerships in PC, internet, cloud, mobile, AI, marketplaces, and more. I've also seen the demise of organizations that are resistant to change. I'm part of the communities, special interest groups, and associations, and I don't see one place that mirrors the ecosystem and brings it all together. You see, I see a vibrant world where hyperscalers, builders, ISV sellers, SIs, MSPs, and other partners come together to spark the ecosystem's growth. I've talked to many of you, and what I continually hear is it's noisy, I don't know whom to listen to, and where to go. There's a massive opportunity, but I'm not sure how to get there. Well, you've been heard. We're getting ready to open the doors early to pilot this new experience. We want this to be your place, with your feedback and participation. If you're a builder, an innovator, or a leader, visit our website.
Again, that market leadership. And in fact, 2023 was probably a seminal point for marketplaces, I would say, right? We went into the year with some predictions. I was hearing predictions at the beginning of 2023 by Canalys that by 2025, by the end of 2025, we'd see $45 billion flow through marketplaces. Jay McBain specifically said that they undercalled that number, in fact, and he expects that number to be reached by the end of this year. And about 80% of that is going to flow through the 3 hyperscalers, but the total aggregate of marketplaces is 45. It also was a big year for, you mentioned some names in particular, but some of the organizations that you worked with reached $1 billion with AWS in marketplace transactions, right? CrowdStrike and Snowflake were among those organizations. What can you say there about where this is all headed?
Well, I still think we're so early on. So whereas it's important to look at a milestone and, like CrowdStrike's of reaching $1 billion and to enjoy that for a moment, but also there's such a massive TAM for what we're doing and so much untapped ground, out there that acknowledging that moment is interesting, but there's so much more to be done. And I just think those milestones are exciting, and more partners seeing the value of marketplace and wanting to lean and make this successful encourages the whole community to move faster together. And that means that buyers are becoming more savvy and learning how to leverage this. It means that sellers, ISVs are, and as well as channel partners and GSIs are seeing this as well. And there's data providers, et cetera, that are participating. So to me, you look at it and you say, okay, infrastructure ISVs were the first that might have been born in the cloud, were the first to really embrace this. Think about how much more potential there is outside of that. So in my kind of newish remit, I get to work with some other partners like Salesforce and ServiceNow. So the recent announcements of them getting listed and working with Marketplace are really exciting. And those are kind of what we would call, business application providers. And then the next frontier will be the industry vertical partners that we have. So there's always something else. And so when I hear the estimates, I get really excited about it, as do my team, in terms of, okay, but one day at a time, this is a marathon. And we need to take this opportunity and maximize it every day.
So I'd love to double click here for a moment, right? You help some of these organizations, we'll call them fledglings at the time, right? Go to this big number. What did you see when you worked with those organizations? What were the attributes that you saw that made them accelerate more rapidly than maybe other organizations?
Sure. Well, there was certainly the existence of a strong partnership with AWS already. And actually, someone that I work with very closely, her name's Jen Valverde, built a framework that we call characteristics of a successful seller. And this framework helped us identify what were the best partners doing that could be repeated and taught to other partners. And as it pertains to, CrowdStrike and Snowflake, they saw and recognized that their buyers were also AWS customers. And therefore, they early on identified that, I remember working with one of the folks at CrowdStrike who said, like, we have a play called Path to Budget that I run, which is how I teach my sellers how and why to engage with Marketplace and AWS to go access that cloud committed spend budget. So in that example, CrowdStrike had a great relationship with AWS and still do. And they had an empowered, activated leader in Jessica Alexander who really drove that internally. So without an empowered change agent, nothing's going to happen. And I think, in partnership leaders, we talk about this a lot I know part of your goal is to elevate the chief partner officer up there with the CMO and the CRO, et cetera. If they can't build that kind of clout and don't have those relationships, this won't go anywhere. So convincing sales leadership to buy in, it takes some effort, and you have to be really thoughtful about where you go first, curating the scenario of where we're going to engage so you can build some momentum, so you can demonstrate results. And then you build momentum from there. So
path to budget. And was this person at the C-suite level? Was it a CRO level individual?
No, a senior director, but how to say it, but understood also where the roadmap needed to go for CrowdStrike to help embrace and protect cloud workloads. So these things came together really, really nicely. And that said, there was also some deep marketplace expertise on that team and a willingness to experiment, that the status quo may not be what they wanted in order to continue to propel their success.
So what do you see? Because I still see some resistance in some quarters from ISVs on Marketplace, right? Especially those who have very strong traditional channels. What do you see from those who resist the change? What are you seeing from them?
Well, I think to some extent we have a little bit of a luxury of working with, my team does, of working with the ones that have raised their hand or are on the fence or want to learn about how to make this be successful. But as evidenced by the recent announcements, there are a lot of the partners that are newer to Marketplace we've been working on for a long time. This doesn't happen overnight, and certainly the larger the organization, sometimes the more difficult it is. That's not always true, but I think if you look at compelling events, and you've mentioned this in some of your other podcasts, in terms of things that are compelling, that are changing the way that business gets done, Marketplace is definitely one of those. Generative AI is definitely one of those. And we're in an area where those two things can come together. And if there are leaders in place that aren't willing to read the tea leaves and look at what the data suggests, I would be a bit concerned. And I think there's a lot of pressure that happens from the board to say, what is our Marketplace strategy? What is our AWS strategy? Where perhaps that conversation wasn't as prevalent, 4 or 5 years ago.
I'm so excited to continue our partnership with AG1. Many of you know I've made taking a green drink supplement part of my health ritual for over 21 years now, and it has made all the difference to my health and well-being. About 6 years ago, Athletic Greens and now their product AG1 became my go-to supplement. AG1 is the first thing I take every morning to power my day. It covers all of my nutritional bases, supports my gut health, gives a boost to my immunity and energy levels. If you want to take ownership of your health, try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/Vince M. That's drinkag1.com/Vince M. Check them out.
So it's getting driven at the board level. These are board level conversations now, as opposed to maybe 3-4 years ago when you started off on this journey.
Well, I think it depends because, this is a dramatic change. So depending upon the size of the organization, depending on where they are, if they're a public company, private company, we work with a lot of, startups as well that are coming up, and they're like I said, they can be a bit more agile that way, but it's a big bet. And what we've learned in 2022 and 2023 was, when I started off, I talked about what every partner wants is to grow and become more efficient. I think we shifted towards the efficiency conversation over the last couple of years, where it was this grow at all costs, notion before. So I think our value proposition on path to budget and other things like that have really come to light given this. So there was some consternation that will a slowdown in spending lead to a slowdown in marketplace. And actually the reverse is true. I think we've seen an acceleration as a result of it. So I would not necessarily have forecasted that, but when our partners started saying, we need a more efficient way to go to market, we want to experiment and try with AWS and Marketplace, that was really exciting.
I also think there's an efficiency in the co-selling methodology or the process, right? Would you agree there?
Yeah, I think so. And well, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it's streamlined so much, right? You remember the old days of co-selling, I have a piece of paper, you have a piece of paper, we'd upload all the information. We figured out that we co-sold something together as opposed to this much more streamlined digital approach to the process.
Well, it's been clunky ever since, account mapping days way back when. And I participated. Spreadsheets. We used to call them the hug and chug, where you get together with another sales rep and you compare notes. It was wildly inefficient. And I say, one of the things that's been prioritized by the partner engineering team has been the investment in automation and tools to streamline that process. So there are tools that we have offered that are kind of first-party services to facilitate that. But what's also really exciting is that, and this goes to your notion of, the reliance on partners, is there's a whole community of partners now that do just that. And I could, name a bunch of that. But the fact that there's a whole, this whole network of partners that exist that didn't before, that are really driving this and creating scale, and they innovate really fast, is exciting. And that's, to me, the hallmark of a healthy community, is that these third parties are really influential. And so we need to make sure that we work closely with them and support them.
I totally agree. And I think we both know some of those organizations.
Yes, we do. We work with them all the time.
So what about our audience? If they want to engage, they want to optimize their success working with you in AWS, what do they need to go do differently or think about this year, 2024?
I think I remember John Cotter was a leading change expert. And maybe like 20 years ago, I read his book, Leading Change. And he had an 8-step model, but the first element, I always remember the first 3. They're like creating urgency, building a coalition, and establishing a strategic vision. And I come back to this, 15 years later, but if there's no urgency, nothing's going to happen. If you don't have the right coalition, which probably involves product, marketing, sales, operations, and the partner teams working together, perhaps others, you're going to flame out. And if you don't have a vision about what you're trying to deliver, like we just talked about, gone are the let's experiment with everything of 3 years ago. We need to know or try to estimate what the light is at the end of the tunnel, or the pot of gold, whatever you want to call it. But if you don't do those 3 things, you're going to be in trouble. And then I would say, and similarly, we've developed tools like that framework I was talking about to say, we've got a step-by-step process that you can use that won't ensure success, but will improve your probability of success. And at a minimum, will help you avoid the pitfalls that, others might have felt, before, which doesn't do good for anyone.
Can you double click with me on those steps, those tools for success?
Sure. So in what we call if we're talking about the framework, I mean, the first one is, you have to create. So after you've established a vision and you have a coalition, you have to list in Marketplace what your customers want to buy in the way that they want to buy it. And that's in a B2B scenario, and the way that your sales teams are selling it today. So I guess what? Launching a brand net new product on Marketplace is not something that I would advise to most ISVs out there. And certainly partners like CrowdStrike and Snowflake haven't followed that model. Because I'm trying to remove as many variables as I can in that process, because I'm trying to win the hearts and minds, not just of customers, but of the sellers in the ISV organization. If they don't see value in this, and it's going to happen some other way, or it's not going to be recognized their quota or whatever else, we've all been through this, like they'll never do it. And I understand why. I was a seller for, 10 years. So I think that's the first one. And then, do we have an empowered change agent? Identifying the right, leadership buy-in is wildly successful. Are you participating in the relevant partner programs? Are you in the APN? Are you part of the Accelerate program? Are you, participating in the workload migration program? But we saw a correlation. Partners that were investing in things like program participation and competencies did better. And it makes sense. This framework isn't, rocket science here, but the more they're invested, the better off that we'll do. So those are some of the other steps that are in the framework. And by the way, we're happy to share this framework with anybody that asks for it. It's out.
Well, I appreciate that. We might ask for a link to that, or maybe you share it with our show notes. It'd be wonderful to share that, Josh. So really great learnings here from you. I really appreciate having you on today. I have a favorite question, though. I ask almost every guest. It is a favorite. You're hosting a dinner party, and you can invite any 3 guests from the present or the past, in fact. One guest said the future. They gave me guests in the future. Whom would you invite to this dinner party? And we could also discuss where we're going to have this dinner party. Maybe you have a favorite location. Whom would you invite and why?
Oh, this question. So this is gonna be mine are all in the past, and that reflects that I'm a history buff. And by the way, I will disclose that they might be aspirational, that they'd want to have dinner with me, but since it's my dinner party and I get to invite them, I'm gonna have at it. I read a book a long time ago about John Adams, the second president, and he would be at the table with me. And the reason why is, I just think about the impact of what our founding fathers did, not just on the US, but the diplomacy, how they navigated a crazy scenario, and just the lasting impact of that would just be fascinating. So I'm fascinated with that time period. And it's just that notion of building something new. I love building things. And when I read that book, I'd really like to meet. That would have been amazing. The other 2, I might, I'd say MLK Jr. would be an inspirational person for me to meet. Passion and energy, you can tell, hopefully, by the way I talk about, our business. I'm a passionate person. And I think that notion of overcoming, I think I read that MLK Jr. was arrested 29 times. And the determination and perseverance, and frankly, what I think we need a little bit more of these days, is something that I truly admire. And my wife would laugh at the third one, and it's not Taylor Swift, but I would say I haven't necessarily committed enough to service. And in terms of someone who could inspire me to do that in my career moving forward, I would say Mother Teresa is welcome to this dinner party to set a good example for everyone about what we can do and what we can achieve. And I think it'll be a really interesting conversation at that dinner table.
What a cool and eclectic list, right? I mean, John Adams. I'm fascinated with the founding fathers and how they brought together. They went to Philadelphia. They started off with a correspondence, right? And then they started congregating in Philadelphia around a common purpose, which is amazing. MLK, Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream speech brings tears to my eyes every time I watch it. So huge fan as well. And then Mother Teresa. Wow. I might have to, maybe I can come bring a beverage or dessert. What do you think? Can I join you?
You're more than welcome. I think I would rely on others to help, guide that conversation. I think I'd be an observer, just watching and absorbing this, and hopefully being more inspired. But I think we would do well with some dinner parties with those three.
Any special location?
That's a good question. It feels like it would be appropriate to do it in the Northeast. I'm a West Coast, person, so I don't love the cold weather, but maybe you mentioned Philadelphia. Maybe that's the place to do it.
Yeah, I'd love it. I love it. I used to live in the Philadelphia area. I could recommend some great restaurants if we want to host it there. So, Josh, you've been you've been a great guest. You've been a lot of fun to spend some time with today. I really love what you're doing. I'm so happy that you chose to come to Ultimate Guide to Partnering to talk about our favorite topic, and look forward to maybe having you again in the future. Maybe you could be a 5-timer like Jay McBain and some of our other guests. So, but for our listeners, this audience of listeners and viewers now, what can they do differently if they want to reach out to you? If they haven't built their strategy yet, is there a way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, well, I get reached out to on LinkedIn, quite a bit. I'd say there's every AWS partner, most AWS partners have some type of a named resource to get engaged with. That's really the gateway, and they're the true quarterbacks that leverage this. So my content, I'm in Partnership Leaders. That's one way to reach me. I'm on LinkedIn is another way to reach me, or through the Partner Development Management organization is another way to reach me. And not just me, but the team that I have the privilege of leading, and the content that we've all collectively participated in building. Because to me, that's what it's about.
Appreciate your time today, Josh. Thanks for joining Ultimate Guide to Partnering.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Ultimate Guide to Partnering. Online at ultimateguidetopartnering.com. If you liked this episode, I'd be thrilled if you left us up to a 5-star review on either Apple or Spotify. This helps us to continue to feature amazing guests. Also, please check out and subscribe to our new YouTube channel, Ultimate Partner. We'll catch you next time on the Ultimate Guide to Partnering.